Thank you. Well, thank you. I've now noticed a pattern that doesn't do much for sponsorship for the Society of Entrepreneurs. If you're a sponsor, you have to speak. So I guess, I'm not sure what that says about future sponsorship sales. Yeah, I'm not sure. So I guess this is my punishment for Paragon being a sponsor. Well, I will tell you a couple of things. My coworkers at Paragon said, don't try to be witty or funny, just be yourself. So I'm sure they meant nothing by that. What do you think? You know, when you think of entrepreneurs, sometimes you don't think of bankers. And if you looked up the definition of entrepreneur, I get probably you wouldn't see a banker's photo in there, or you wouldn't see Paragon's name under there. But I will tell you, we pride ourselves as being very entrepreneurial. And I've been in the banking business now 30-something years. And even though I would tell you that I probably wouldn't officially fit that definition, if I haven't been an entrepreneur, I've sure had a front row seat for it. Because I think about it, and thinking about today, thinking about people I've had a chance to interact with over my career. And some of the things that I've had a chance to hear about and see. And I want to tell you a little bit about those and their culture and how they were involved in the community. The first one I think about, I guess, I'd been in the banking business from Rhodes. I came out of Rhodes. That's what brought me to town. And I came out of Rhodes and I went into banking. And I thought they didn't like me very much because they sent me to Millington. And I thought, boy, they're trying to get rid of me. They're sending me to Millington. And what I found out was I loved it. And I had a chance to work with a guy and meet a guy pretty quick named Babe Howard. And so, what a great entrepreneur. And what a great culture. Look what he did. My son, who's graduating, I guess, Saturday, actually played rugby many times over the last few months on the baseball. They're adjacent to the baseball fields at USA Baseball. I don't think Babe would approve of us playing out on the baseball field. We played on the fields there near there. And it's because of Babe and the culture he had. If you knew him, you knew he was no pretense whatsoever. Always wearing khakis. He knew all of his employees, knew all their names. It was really fun to visit and get to know him and work with him. I got a chance to meet with him when he was throwing around a concept that I thought was so foreign. I thought, what in the world? Babe usually is so grounded. What is going on? He's called me and asked me to come down and talk to him about something called cellular service, mobile telephones. And if you know, this was 1982. Babe already had the maps of the area and became a 25% owner in Bell South Mobility, which of course grew and grew. And so, what a great entrepreneur, and what a great culture he had at his company. Roll forward a few years, I'll tell you a funny one. An entrepreneur who I met probably in 1987, 88, and we go to lunch, and the first hint would be as I walk in, he said, "I don't sit with my back to the door." Okay, I guess I'll sit with my back to the door. Of course, customer one in charge, right? So when I sit down and he sits down after me, when his coat drops open, I notice he has a gun on his waist, and I'm sitting there going, okay, I'm sitting between him and the door, and he has the gun. Okay, so either I get shot by him or whoever comes in the door. That's unusual enough, and then the conversation starts taking place, and he wants to borrow a few $1 million to buy some small planes to use for unnamed operations in Latin America. And I'm looking around for the camera and saying, okay, well, obviously, like today I'm being filmed, something's wrong. Well, we check it out, and it's a true story. It is a very true story. Supposedly, the folks in D.C. wouldn't write a check for X millions, but they would allow him to write a check for X thousands a month to operate the planes. And it was like, okay. So I guess that's an entrepreneur. I'm not sure about his culture, but he definitely was getting ready to have some community involvement, wasn't he? Next guy I would tell you I met on a serious note was Bob Cannon. I worked for UP for a couple of years early in my career. And I think if I recall correctly, Ben Rollins, who was CEO, introduced me to exactly one person in that 2 years, and I went on a call with him. He introduced me to a lot more than that, but I went on one call with him that I can remember, and was to meet a guy named Bob Cannon. And got to know Bob, and if you know the story of Bob a little bit, he was running a division of Procter & Gamble, where he'd been for a few decades as one of their senior leaders. And Bob and his son wanted to go in the dry cleaning business, and over the next 10, 15 years became the largest dry cleaner. Guess what? A lot of people didn't know that about him. His son ran dry cleaners. They operated under about 10 different names. I always thought it was a funny strategy. If you didn't like driving one across the street and was doing business with somebody else, they owned that one too. You just didn't know it, okay? And so they were always, they were very, very large business. Bob, of course, led the effort with Dave Ferraro and others to take Buckeye private, to buy Buckeye from Procter & Gamble. And Bob, of course, had an unbelievable culture. And think about community involvement, where Babe was really active in North Shelby County and did a lot of things and brought the Olympic baseball training facility to the Memphis area. Bob Cannon and his family donated the money for the Cannon Center for the Performing Arts we still benefit from today. And I happen to be chair of the Memphis Symphony, so guess what? I'm there many times a year. Also, Bob was chairman of the United Way and chairman of a lot of other things, and had a unique culture at Buckeye, one that no doubt had a little bit of influence from the Procter & Gamble days, but was very entrepreneurial and did a great job. Another one I can think about from that front row seat as a person in the banking business was one where I knew a guy from the banking business. As a banker. He came in and was a customer. He came to see me one day and said, "I lost my job yesterday. I thought about starting a business. Would you loan me the money to help start a business?" And of course you sit there and go, that's a pretty tough request as a loan request, right? I only need $25,000. I'll put up my house as collateral because I know this is a startup business. And I'm proud to say that 10 years later, he sold it to a publicly held company for several $1 million. And so it's fun to see those things as, you know, as a banker. Roll forward to last week. I had a chance to meet with some people who really was, the meeting with them was almost as exciting, as unusual as the conversation with Babe Howard in Millington in 1982. These guys have worked for 5.5 years and invested $100,000 of their own money. Think it'll take $400,000 more to really roll out their concept, and they've got it patented. And so it's pretty exciting to have that front row seat. But if I think about something a lot of those had in common was a real culture at their company that was special. You think about also that culture many times, like with Babe Howard and Bob Cannon and others, really had a focus on the community. And I think about how special that is here in the Memphis area, how important that is in the Memphis area. You know, when I think about how you define culture, you don't define it, and this is no offense to any of you that are in HR, you don't define it by your employee handbook. How many of you work at a company that has an employee handbook? Okay? How many of you think that employee handbook is how you define your culture? It's not. And it tells you how you're going to do business, but it doesn't really tell you how your employees do business when they're doing business out there. Because they take that employee handbook, you make them go through orientation, right? You make them go through it when they become a new employee, but they put that in the drawer or on the shelf. And guess what? The culture is really how your employees define it. And Pearson, I appreciate the very kind comments about Paragon. That's one of the reasons I joined them about 1.5 years ago. After being in the business about 30 years, I had a chance to sit back and look and say, where do I think we would have the right culture, the right focus on the employees, where the employees can focus on the customer? Where does that culture also extend itself to the community? I've been involved in things in the community since I was a student at Rhodes. And within 7 years of graduating from Rhodes, I became board chair of Big Brothers and Big Sisters here in Memphis. When I was at Rhodes, we got real active in muscular dystrophy, and I came out of Rhodes at 21 years old and joined the board of the MDA. So I will tell you, that kind of culture was really important to me as I made a decision what to do in terms of the next phase of my career. So that's one of those things that's really important. You don't define it from your employee handbook. You really define it with how you do business and how your employees do business and how you lead. I think about some special cultures in town, obviously, at companies like FedEx. But then you also can think of things like Enron, too. It's, you know, you make a decision as a business owner which one you want to do and how you want to do it. Yeah, one of the things that I guess in thinking about these remarks today was your culture has to be intentional, not accidental. You define some principles you want to do business by, and that's how you do it. So whether you're Kerry Rodder at Comfort Keepers, and Kerry and I go way back, his wife, who's in the business, and I worked together as loan officers at First Tennessee a long time ago. And maybe I'm responsible for y'all getting married since I hired her and brought her from Charleston, South Carolina. I'm a matchmaker too. I just didn't know it, I just didn't know. But what I can tell you is at your small business or your large business or the place in you work, you define what the culture is like at your place of employment. You know, it's kind of interesting in thinking about this. I found a remark that I thought was pretty interesting. Larry Bird said, "I've got a theory that if you give 100% all the time, somehow things just always work out in the end." And you think about it, that's a little naive, but it's not. If you think about it, if you give 100% effort and your employees give 100% effort because they see you doing it, well, somehow it usually works out at the end. Okay, it doesn't have to be complicated. It's usually pretty simple. I would tell you that a great culture at your company creates unbelievable employee loyalty. And if you have employee loyalty, it leads to, I think, great customer loyalty. So it's not accidental, it's intentional. If you have great employee loyalty, and I think we pride ourselves that we have that at Paragon, is that if you have good employee loyalty, it's going to lead you to some good customer results too. Because those employees are the ones that really build your brand. You can talk all day long, and I've been with an institution before who had an advertising campaign that I thought, boy, we're saying X, but we're really doing Y. And there's a little bit of a disconnect here, and that can be pretty confusing to an employee. But it's pretty nice when it's intentional and you line it up, and guess what? The values, the principles you're operating off, it's how you build your brand, and your employees buy it and get it and operate from it. How many of you have been in Memphis more than 30 years? Do you remember the culture that FedEx had in those days? Unbelievably entrepreneurial. The people were so loyal about FedEx and so proud of their culture. And it went through a cycle where in the 90s it wasn't that way. It was getting very bureaucratic. And guess what? I think it's cycled back right now with some of the cutbacks. It's probably being tested again. But I've seen it cycle, ebb and flow at companies such as FedEx that are extremely successful. Can't imagine the Memphis area without it. But what a special culture it had in the 80s, and I think it has again now, and it's getting ready to be tested again. But think about their involvement and how they're involved in the community. As I said, build a culture that adds value and build your brand, not destroys it. You know, give your employees some credit on the front line because they're the one that touch the customer. I think about it, people talk to me about things, and I say, hold on a second. What's really important, waving at Allie Prescott as he goes by, what's really important, he knows me well enough not to come in here and listen to this, okay, is, guess what? It's not how many customers I touch or prospects I touch. It's really how I interact with our frontline employee, because they're going to touch hundreds more than I do on a weekly and monthly basis. But that comes back to that culture you want to have. Make it intentional, not accidental. In terms of community involvement, make that intentional, not accidental also. As I said, one of the things that attracted me to Paragon is that we have something there called ACTS, A-C-T-S, and it's assisting the community through service. And we encourage it, we track it, we report it, and for a small company, we make sure it's a real priority. And we have a lot of employees that serve on nonprofit boards and volunteer every year, and it produces a lot of brand recognition for a small company. And I encourage you, it can happen and happen in your business too. So make sure that culture focuses on the company, on the community. Something else in looking into this and talking, I was surprised, and maybe some of you have heard the number. How many nonprofits are in the Memphis area? In Shelby County, how many nonprofits are in the Memphis area? Anybody heard? How many, Jill? Oh no. I heard 3,000. The number is actually 3,900. Now, I will tell you, of the 3,900, and I think this reflects well on us as a community, 2,900 of them are churches. And so when you say the Bible Belt and you say we're the buckle of it, guess what? That speaks to it. But 2,900 of the 3,900 are churches, but let's set those aside for just a moment. See, hey, the employees there told me I couldn't be funny. See, all you have to do is try. All you have to do is swing at a waitress, and it can be very funny. Yeah, it's all good as long as you didn't knock the coffee. I didn't knock the coffee out of your hands, right? As she was walking by, she said it's all good. Focus on the 1,000 that are not churches, and think about how important those are. How many of you are currently on, have been on a nonprofit board or active in a nonprofit? Virtually everybody in the room. Anybody realize how tested they're being right now in terms of the economy? The numbers are unbelievable in terms of the ones that are that are really struggling, and struggling in the Memphis area. You hear all kinds of stories every day. I think there was an article on one in the paper yesterday, on one that was maybe it was today. It was one in Fayette County. The guy with the dog with the shelter, and the tornado, the F1 tornado hit it. What a great story on what he's done and how he's done it with a shoestring budget. Started at his house and it's evolved. A lot of people have turned out, raised a little bit of money, repaired a lot of things, and doing some. And as you might would imagine, some of the volunteers have adopted some of the pets that they've encountered out there in that shelter. Let's shift back to the symphony for a minute, because I told you I was chairman of the symphony, and this probably won't surprise you, but 75% of the symphonies in America are operating at a deficit because ticket sales. I don't care whether you're, and I was chairman of the symphony when I was in Nashville, and big organization, $30 million budget. Where here ours is $5 million. Now they've got a big building with a lot of debt, beautiful building with a lot of debt up there. That's when their budget's so much larger. But here with us, no building, no liabilities, which is a nice thing. You know, the Camden Center is owned by the city, and we just lease it at a very nominal cost. But when your earned revenue only covers about a fourth of your budget, guess what? You got to raise 3/4, don't you? 3/4 every year. And in a tough economy, well, that's what all the nonprofits are facing. So what I would tell you is the culture at the for-profit businesses in Memphis are the ones that will determine which of the nonprofits in the community survive and thrive. So if you're on a board, stay involved. If you're at a company that doesn't encourage it, try to encourage it. Role model that behavior. Talk about it. Try to encourage it. Try to get engaged in that, because that part of the community is extremely important to all of us. If you take out the 30 largest, which are the ones you think about sometimes, Baptist, Methodist, and of course, how could I leave out St. Jude? Take out those, there are a lot that are very, very small, whose annual operating budget is well under $5 million, doing a lot of really good things, and so I encourage you to engage in those. Later this summer, the University of Memphis and the Alliance for Nonprofit Excellence are going to come out with a study, and I think it'll be eye-opening. And talking to them about this last week, they're the ones that were able to provide the numbers, and said that the study that's really started out by Indiana University and now has been now co-led locally by University of Memphis and the Alliance are going to provide us some real thought-provoking numbers and metrics, including how the nonprofit community is doing as a whole. So circle back to that culture that you have at your business, that culture that the Babe Howards and the Bob Cannons and hopefully your business and our business, and say, how does it really translate? The for-profit community will determine the fate of the nonprofits, those 1,000, ignore the churches for a moment, those 1,000 that are here in our community that have tens of thousands of employees and touching hundreds of thousands of our fellow Memphians here in this area. So I'm going to stop and see if you have any questions. I will tell you, and I think if you don't remember anything else, and I think you know this, especially if you're in business, and Dale, Dave, I think this would speak to you guys, especially to small businesses, and Carrie and others I know in the room. Your culture that you develop your business is intentional. It's not accidental. If you want to know whether or not it's effective and you want to know whether it's not working or not, hire a new employee, and then if you could get them to be candid about 3 or 4 weeks later after they've been there for a while, not the first day, but 3 weeks later or 3 months later, and find out about that culture of your business and whether or not it's being effective. And I think you don't have to ask them, but you can ask yourself, is that culture promoting things such as community involvement? And doesn't that make a difference for you and your business? So with that, I'll stop and see if there's any questions. Thank you. Any questions for me? Yes, sir.
So when you're talking about the involvement, I know in HR now a lot of the buzzword on that is employee engagement. And so how is that something that you cultivate in a company?
Well, I think 3 or 4 things. First is that you role model it. Second is you try to support the things that your employees are involved in, either allowing the time, encouraging the time, tracking the time, maybe even trying to do things like helping them with contributions or offering. And a lot of times what we do sometimes is offer our conference rooms. I mean, I probably had 100 symphony meetings in one of our conference rooms over the last year. Seems like more, but it's probably only been 100, okay? But literally, we do that for a lot. I think there are a lot of things you can do that don't cost you much money, but there are some formal programs you can put in place. One of the reasons I will tell you, and this is going to sound a little bit self-serving, I don't mean for it to, but one of the reasons I got involved in the community was to network for business, like we do today, but also to help me develop personally. I found out, guess what? There was a lot less risk, business risk, career risk, if I was trying to learn how at age 29 to lead the Big Brothers and Big Sisters board than practice those skills in the business boardroom. Number one, I didn't have access to the boardroom at 29. Okay, I wasn't going to be able to go into the boardroom and model those. And try those things. But I got a chance to learn with some real professionals in the room. I mean, State Senator Jim Kyle was in the room as the past chair. I mean, I could go through that. So there were some really, really heavyweights in there. I don't know why they let me in, but I had a passion for the organization, and they allowed me to help lead it. But I can tell you, that's some of the things I think you could do at your business. So I think track it, talk about it, measure it, incent it through ways, host meetings, match contributions, pick organizations that you're going to be involved in. I've never been involved at Make-A-Wish until I joined Paragon. And we do something every year for that. And so I've never been exposed to it. I knew it was a very worthwhile cause. How could it not be? But I can tell you that's something where, again, got a chance to connect through at the office. And of course, it was very, very personally fulfilling. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but how about other questions? Yes, sir.
Mike, I've always been proud of the fact that this shows up well on lists for charitable giving and we're nonprofit. But at what point does the market become saturated with nonprofits where they're stepping on each other and there's confusion about what this one does and they're doing the same thing?
It's already there. It's already there. It's admirable when a celebrity or an athlete becomes exposed to something and they start a foundation to help support something that their family's been impacted by. But you also sit there and go, hold on a second, why didn't you just align with, and fill in the blank, why did you have to start your own foundation because you want to do it differently? So I'll tell you, one of the cities that I find, the symphonies and the operas and the ballets are struggling across America, as I said. One of the best role models in America is Dayton, Ohio, where they've combined the three to get rid of the administrative overhead and burden. Well, the Alliance works on that here. Similar organization in Nashville, where I lived for 7 years. They try their best to try to bring things together. So why should we need, at one time when I was involved in Leadership Nashville, we had a real project where a few of us focused on the homeless. And what we found was, and I don't remember the exact numbers, this will be close enough, there were 15, 20, 30 without the churches working on the homeless, and the total amount of resources being developed to the homeless, and at that time, population was even larger than Memphis in the homeless, about 4,000. The amount of money was 50 million, 75 million. You almost could have bought every person that was homeless to find in Nashville a home for the amount of annual money being spent because it was being done by 40 different organizations, one who did this and one who did that. And so it is frustrating. This economy is forcing some of that, and that's a good thing. Because let's bring them together. Why should we have all this overlap with all the different ones? And that's something we look at. That's something we talk about. There are a lot of reasons why it doesn't work sometimes. There are some reasons why it has to work. How about other questions? Well, thank you. I enjoyed it. Oh, yes, ma'am. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, what now? Oh, By far the biggest one for banking business and us especially is the tough times we went through in 2008, 9, and 10. And you know a culture is really strong when you can make it through the business results challenges that a business may have. As I said, FedEx is getting ready to have one when they do their cuts. It's hard to say I'm an employee-focused culture at the same time as you're reducing workforce. Okay, there's a bank here in town that's cut a lot. FedEx is getting ready to be tested. So as you do that, that's a real tough time, and it's really hard to be waving that flag saying that at the same time that the HR person's meeting in the conference room saying your services are no longer needed. And so it takes a real focus. But I think business results is obviously one of them. A change in leadership is another one. A change in ownership is by far probably the biggest for a small business. Will that continue? So I think those are the biggest threats, but you can survive it. As I said, I've seen it with FedEx, ebb and flow. Really, really unbelievable spirit of culture in the 80s, pretty tested in the 90s. A lot of accusations of bureaucracy and politics and stuff like that. And what did this company do? Became one of the biggest companies, most successful companies, one of the most admired companies in the world by doing what? Staying focused on those principles through that rough storm, and ended up acquiring some very large companies across America. And I think we benefited from it in Memphis as they acquired all those businesses and brought those leadership people here. So thanks again. Appreciate it.